Good day, students. Welcome to this JSS 1 Civic Education lesson on violence, causes and solutions. Nigeria faces numerous challenges from violence, insurgency in the northeast, farmer-herder conflicts in the Middle Belt, kidnapping for ransom, electoral violence, cult violence in secondary schools and universities, domestic violence, and communal clashes between ethnic groups. Violence undermines democracy, disrupts education, destroys economic development, and causes immense human suffering. Understanding why violence occurs and what can be done about it is a vital civic competence. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define violence and its categories, describe the types of violence in Nigeria, explain the causes of violence, describe the effects of violence on individuals, families, and society, and explain strategies for preventing and resolving violence. Let us begin. What is violence? Violence is the intentional use of physical force, power, actual or threatened, against a person, group, or community, resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, or deprivation. World Health Organization definition, adapted for Nigeria. Keyword: intentional. Accidents are not violence. Violence is a deliberate act. Categories of violence. 1. Interpersonal violence, violence between individuals or small groups. Domestic/family violence, abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, within the home, spouse on spouse, parent on child, elder abuse. A serious but often hidden problem in Nigeria. Sexual violence, rape, sexual assault, forced marriage, sexual harassment. Very prevalent in Nigeria, the #EweMeToo and broader #MeToo conversations in Nigeria revealed systemic sexual violence. Child abuse, physical beating, emotional abuse, child labor, child marriage, witchcraft accusation of children. Communal violence, clashes between communities, Egulari-Mularai, Anambra, Ifemodikik, Osun, Jos Plateau ethnic clashes, farmer-herder conflicts, Benue, Kaduna, Plateau. 2. Collective/political violence. Insurgency/terrorism, Boko Haram/ISWAP in northeast Nigeria, over 40,000 deaths since 2009, thousands of civilians killed, millions displaced, Chibok girls abduction, 2014, 276 girls abducted. Bandits and kidnappers in northwest. Electoral violence, thuggery, ballot box snatching, assassination of political opponents, intimidation of voters, widespread in Nigerian elections. Ethnic and religious conflict, crisis between communities of different ethnic or religious backgrounds, e.g., Kaduna State recurring Christian-Muslim violence. Cult/gang violence, secret cult violence in secondary schools and universities, Black Axe, Buccaneers, stabbings, shootings, ritual murders. 3. Structural violence, harm caused by social structures, institutions, or systems, not by individuals directly. Example: poverty that prevents access to healthcare, discrimination against certain ethnic groups in employment, girls denied education by family. These structures cause measurable harm, malnutrition, death, stunted potential, even when no one punches anyone. Example in Nigeria, Northern Almajares, millions of boys in unregulated Islamic schools, denied access to formal education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, structural violence through state neglect. Causes of violence in Nigeria. 1. Poverty and inequality. Extreme poverty creates desperation, inequality, a tiny elite controlling vast oil wealth while millions live in abject poverty, creates resentment. Kidnapping for ransom and armed robbery are direct products of economic desperation. 2. Unemployment. Nigeria's youth unemployment rate exceeds 40%. Millions of educated young people without jobs are prime recruits for cults, criminal gangs, Boko Haram, and political thugs. 3. Ethnic and religious divisions. Nigeria's 250+ ethnic groups and roughly equal Muslim-Christian populations create fault lines that politicians and religious extremists exploit. Ethnic hatred, e.g., anti-Igbo sentiment, Christian-Muslim tensions, can erupt into communal violence. 4. Political manipulation. Politicians hire thugs, area boys, cult members, to intimidate opponents and steal elections. When those political patrons lose power, the thugs turn to crime and violence autonomously. 5. Weak governance and impunity. Perpetrators of violence, from electoral thugs to harder farmer attackers to corrupt officials, are rarely prosecuted. Impunity, freedom from punishment, encourages more violence. 6. Easy access to weapons. Proliferation of illegal small arms in Nigeria, from the Sahel region, porous borders, arms smuggled from Libya, post-Gaddafi collapse, have flooded West Africa. 7. Historical grievances and marginalization. Communities that feel excluded from power, resources, and development, e.g., Niger Delta communities over oil wealth, Southeast over perceived marginalization, may resort to violence. 8. Drug abuse. As covered in the previous lesson, drug abuse fuels violent behavior, stimulants increase aggression, addicts commit violence to fund habits. 9. Social media. Inciting content, fake news, and hate speech spread rapidly on WhatsApp and Facebook can trigger more violence, e.g., the 2020 Plateau State violence partly driven by viral fake images. 10. Broken families and poor upbringing. Children raised in violent homes or without parental guidance are more likely to become violent adults. Effects of violence on individuals: physical injury, disability, death, psychological trauma, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, displacement and homelessness, loss of livelihoods, destruction of education. Chibok girls' abduction ended education for 276 students. Millions in northeast Nigeria cannot go to school due to Boko Haram. On families: loss of family members, death, kidnapping, economic devastation, displacement, psychological trauma, domestic violence cycle. Children who witness domestic violence are more likely to perpetuate it. On society and the nation: economic destruction, investors and businesses flee areas with high violence, tourism destroyed, agriculture disrupted, infrastructure damaged, millions of internally displaced persons, IDPs, need emergency assistance. Nigeria has over 3 million IDPs. Democratic damage. Electoral violence suppresses voter turnout and prevents free elections. Political assassination silence opposition. Violence undermines rule of law and democratic governance. Education disruption. Thousands of schools closed in northeast Nigeria due to Boko Haram attacks. UNICEF estimates Nigeria has the world's largest out-of-school children population. Violence is a major cause. Psychological trauma at national level. Nigerians living under persistent security threats develop fatalism, distrust of institutions, and reluctance to engage civically, damaging democracy. Strategies for preventing and resolving violence. Conflict prevention. Education for peace, civic education, social studies, and religious studies taught properly prevent violence by building respect, tolerance, and civic values. Inclusive governance, ensure all ethnic groups, regions, and communities have meaningful representation and access to government resources. Poverty reduction, addressing root causes, youth employment programs, empower, etc. Community dialogue, traditional rulers, religious leaders as peace brokers. Conflict resolution mechanisms. Dialogue and negotiation. Government negotiates with insurgent groups. Boko Haram amnesty talks, Niger Delta Amnesty Program 2009. Mediation. A neutral third party helps conflicting sides reach agreements, e.g., amirs and obas as mediators in communal disputes. Arbitration. A neutral arbiter, court or panel, imposes a binding decision. Traditional justice. Customary courts. Community elders adjudicate local disputes, cheaper and faster than formal courts. Nonviolent civil disobedience, #EndSARS protest, 2020, showed Nigerians can campaign for change through peaceful protest, though some later devolved into violence. Law enforcement and justice, effective policing, prosecution of perpetrators, prison reform. Rehabilitation, for former combatants, Boko Haram deradicalization programs, Niger Delta Amnesty Program, reintegration of former militants. International support, Multinational Joint Task Force, Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Benin, combating Boko Haram, ECOWAS conflict prevention mechanisms. Conflict resolution approaches, school/personal level. Negotiation, two parties discuss and find a mutually acceptable solution. Peer mediation, trained student mediators help resolve disputes. Counseling, school counselors help students manage anger and conflict. Avoidance of gangs and cults, refusal to join secret cults is the most important individual-level violence prevention for JSS/SS students. 3 examination questions. Question 1. Define violence and describe 3 categories, giving Nigerian examples of each. Violence is the intentional use of physical force or power against a person, group, or community, resulting in or likely to result in injury, death, psychological harm, or deprivation. Who definition? 3 categories. A. Interpersonal violence, violence between individuals, e.g., domestic violence, the husband beating his wife in Lagos, sexual violence, rape cases that fill Nigerian court dockets, child abuse, physical punishment inflicted on a child beyond lawful discipline. B. Collective/political violence, violence by organized groups for political or social ends, e.g., Boko Haram terrorism in Borno State, over 40,000 deaths since 2009, electoral thuggery, ballot box snatching and voter intimidation during Nigerian elections, the 2011 post-election violence that killed hundreds in northern Nigeria, secret cult violence in schools and universities, stabbings by black acts or icon fraternities. C. Structural violence, harm caused by social systems and institutions rather than direct physical force, e.g., millions of northern or Mayuri boys denied access to formal education, healthcare, and economic opportunities through state neglect. They suffer malnutrition, disease, and stunted life prospects without anyone directly attacking them. Gender discrimination that prevents women from inheriting property under customary law, and economic harm without physical violence. Question 2. Explain 4 causes of violence in Nigeria, giving examples. A. Poverty and unemployment. Extreme poverty creates desperation and provides fertile ground for recruitment into violent groups. With over 130 million Nigerians living in multidimensional poverty and youth unemployment exceeding 40%, young men with no income prospects are vulnerable to being recruited by Boko Haram, bandits, or political thugs. Bandits in Zamfara and Katsina states mostly kidnap for money, poverty-driven crime escalating into mass violence. B. Political manipulation and impunity. Nigerian politicians routinely hire gangs of unemployed young men as political thugs to intimidate opponents, snatch ballot boxes, and harass opposition supporters. When elections end, these armed gangs do not disband but continue crime. Impunity, perpetrators are rarely prosecuted, makes this pattern repeat every election cycle. C. Ethnic and religious manipulation. Nigeria's 250-plus ethnic groups and rough Muslim-Christian divide are exploited by politicians seeking to mobilize communal support. Hate speeches by politicians or religious figures can trigger riots, as seen in recurring Jos Plateau crisis, 2001, 2008, 2010, where thousands died in Muslim-Christian clashes. D. Easy access to illegal weapons. The post-Gaddafi collapse of Libya, 2011, flooded the Sahel with weapons. AK-47s and other arms are cheaply available across Nigeria's porous northern borders. Armed herder groups, bandits, and Boko Haram use weapons that were once beyond reach of non-state actors. Question 3. Describe 4 strategies for preventing violence in Nigeria. A. Education for peace and tolerance, teaching civic education, social studies, and religious education properly, emphasizing respect for diversity, human rights, and peaceful conflict resolution, builds young citizens who reject violence. The JSS and SS Civic Education curriculum is specifically designed to address this. B. Inclusive and accountable governance. Violence often arises from excluded groups feeling they have no peaceful avenue for change. Including all ethnic groups, regions, and communities meaningfully in governance, distributing resources equitably through FAC formula reform, and prosecuting perpetrators of violence creates legitimacy for peaceful governance. C. Economic empowerment and youth employment. Programs like Empower, the Anchors Bauer program, and GEP, or Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, that provide income and skills to unemployed youth reduce their vulnerability to recruitment into violent groups. Addressing root economic causes is more sustainable than purely security approaches. D. Strengthening law enforcement and justice, effective community policing, prosecuting electoral thugs and communal violence perpetrators, reforming the police, the #EndSARS reforms demanded in 2020, and ensuring courts function impartially reduce the impunity that encourages repeat violence. The Nigerian Police Force's Community Policing Initiative aims to embed police within communities to prevent crime before it escalates. 3 common mistakes. Mistake 1. Saying violence is only physical. Violence is not only physical assault. Emotional abuse, sexual abuse, psychological intimidation, structural harm, poverty and discrimination that cause suffering are all forms of violence. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, VAPP, explicitly covers physical, sexual, psychological, and economic violence. In examinations, students who only list fighting, stabbing, shooting as violence are missing the full picture. Mistake 2, saying there is no solution to Nigeria's violence, it's just how Nigeria is. Violence in Nigeria is a solvable problem. The Niger Delta, once a zone of serious oil-related militancy, was significantly pacified after the 2009 amnesty program, proving that dialogue, economic incentives, and political inclusion can reduce violence. Communal violence between groups that have been neighbors for generations often subsides after genuine dialogue. Nihilism, giving up, is not a civic attitude, civic action works. Mistake 3, confusing conflict and violence. Conflict, disagreement, tension between groups with different interests, is normal and inevitable in any diverse society. Violence is one way conflict is expressed, but it is not the only or inevitable way. Conflict can be resolved through negotiation, mediation, and dialogue without violence. Civic education promotes peaceful conflict resolution, managing conflict without it becoming violent. Summary. Violence, intentional use of force causing harm. Types: interpersonal, domestic, sexual, child abuse, communal, collective/political, insurgency, Boko Haram, electoral violence, cult violence, structural, poverty, discrimination, neglect causing harm without direct force. Causes: poverty and unemployment, ethnic/religious divisions, political manipulation, weak governance and impunity, illegal weapons, historical marginalization, drug abuse, social media hate speech, broken families. Affects: individual injury, death, trauma, displacement, family loss, economic ruin, violence cycle, society, economic destruction, IDPs, school closures, democratic damage, national trauma. Prevention: education for peace, inclusive governance, poverty reduction, community dialogue, traditional rulers as peace brokers. Resolution: dialogue and negotiation, mediation, arbitration, traditional justice, law enforcement and prosecution, rehabilitation of combatants, international cooperation, MNJTF, ECOWAS. At school level, peer mediation, counseling, avoiding gangs and cults. Conflict is normal, violence is not the answer. For homework: A. Define violence and describe 3 types with Nigerian examples. B. State 4 causes of violence in Nigeria. C. Describe 4 strategies for preventing violence. Attempt a quiz on your LMS. Be an agent of peace in your school, family, and community. Nigeria needs it. Visit Lightech Academy at academy.lightech.com.ng. Until next time.